there are parts of the nephrons there already that were mentioned, which would be the difference between cortical and juxtamedullary nephron. Balikan natin mamaya ha, papasummarize ko sa inyo. We go first to the parts of the nephron, which is the basic functional unit of the kidney. So, bawat isang kidney has 1 million of nephrons in it. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at now the overview of the parts of your nephron. So the nephron actually has two main parts. First would be your glomerulus. Glomerulus, ito. And the second part will be from here to here, which are called your renal tubule. Wait lang ha. Tingnan ko kung pwede siyang, kasi nawawala yung pointer ko. Stop share ko lang ha, hindi ko siya i-input. Turo niya. Renal tubule. It's, wait lang. Renal tubule. Okay, let's take a look at now the overview of the parts of your nephron. So the nephron actually has two main parts. First would be your glomerulus here. And the second part will be from here to here, which are called your renal tubule. Nakikita niyo ba, so guys? Your glomerulus, nakikita niyo itong parts of the nephron? Hello? Nakikita niyo yung parts ng nephron? Baka kasi hindi nag-move yung screen. Nakikita niyo ba yung parts ng nephron sa screen?
Yes, doctor.
So again, the glomerulus and you have your renal tubules here. Opinion. Your glomerulus is also called renal corpuscle, no? And when you say renal corpuscle or glomerulus, you are actually referring to the stuff of capillaries here, which is enclosed by your Bowman's capsule. Okay, the space between the capillaries and the capsule will be, of course, your Bowman's space. Okay, so blood into your glomerulus is actually transported by your afferent arteriole coming from your renal artery. So it will be filtered, no, which is the main function of your glomerulus, to filter the blood that goes through it, no? And the filtered, unfiltered components now will be drains to your collecting duct. So several collecting tubules. Okay, we have a lot of collecting tubules here draining to this collecting duct. Okay. Nasundan nyo ba, guys? The segments of the nephron you should memorize because it should be in order. Hindi pwedeng magkagulo-gulo sila. Okay? Mauunang proximal convoluted. Then you have the loop of Henle, tatlo yun. Descending, pababa, thin limb. Ascending, thin limb. Then ascending, thick limb. Loop of Henle. And then you have your distal convoluted tubule, which goes into your collecting tubules. And then the collecting tubules connect now to your collecting duct. Okay? Questions? Tubule drains to your collecting duct. Here, so as the filtered fluid from the blood enters now the collecting duct, and from there it goes, it's now your urine now, and it goes down to your renal pelvis, to the ureter, then to the bladder for storage before it will be released from the body. Okay, so the collecting duct actually has three parts also, depending on their location in the renal parenchyma. So you have a cortical collecting duct, so that part which is on the cortex, your outer medullary collecting duct, and an inner medullary collecting duct. Okay, so those are the parts of your nephron. So now let's take a look at also the blood supply of your nephron. So as I said a while ago, the blood that goes to the glomerulus comes from your renal artery here, and it will be transported particularly by your afferent arteriole. So blood from the glomerulus is drained by your efferent arteriole, and it is continuous now to your capillaries that actually supplies the nephron. And the capillary that is that supplies particularly your loop of Henle, whose location is almost parallel to the loop of Henle here. You call them particularly your peritubular capillaries. Okay, so this will be your peritubular capillaries. So blood will now be going to your venules, and then goes now to your renal vein. Okay, so maliwanag ba yun, guys? This is another picture of the nephron here. This is actually the regional orientation of the parts of the nephron, the glomerulus and tubules here. So I would just like to emphasize some structures that are actually close to each other. So if you take a look at here, this is the glomerulus, and this will be proximal convoluted tubule here. The straight portion of the proximal tubule, descending thin limb, or the loop of Henle, ascending thin limb. Guys, sorry. Yung aking pointer ay hindi nagja-jive, no? So, this is the relative position of the glomerulus and the renal tubules talaga. Yung isang picture kanina ay para lang makita ninyo yung lahat ng parts. But this is how it looks like, no? Yung mga structures na magkakatabi. So, if this is your renal artery here, this will be your afferent arteriole going now to your glomerulus. Ito yung ating half of the mga unfiltered substances will go into the efferent or afferent arteriole. So ito yung kanyang location, no? Distal convoluted tubule goes back, no? Katabi ng afferent arteriole. And then you have your connecting tubules, and then you have your collecting duct. Okay. Maliwanag ba yung structure, guys? Importanteng alam ninyo yung structure, pati yung blood flow. Kasi importante yan mamaya sa discussion on urine formation. Okay. The selling-thickly nodule form. And if you take a look at here, the one that I'm telling you, this is actually your distal convoluted tubule. And yun sabi ko rin. Okay. So this is actually a picture of your glomerulus here, a cross section, of course. So this will be your glomerulus here. This will be your Bowman's capsule, the capillaries. This will be your afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole. And as I mentioned a while ago, the distal tubule is actually located near yung ating afferent and efferent arteriole. And I made mention about the juxtaglomerular apparatus in the previous slide. Okay. Sige. Balikan lang natin, ha? Imagine this. This is your distal convoluted tubule here. This is your afferent arteriole, and this is your efferent arteriole. So, yung nakita niyong slide kanina is a cross-section. Okay? This is your efferent arteriole. This is your afferent arteriole. Ito yung mga capillaries. And ito yung ating Bowman's capsule here. And this is the distal convoluted tubule. This is very important. It's because there's a structure here we call the JG apparatus, no? Or your juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay. So which is this is actually a picture of your glomerulus here, a cross section, of course. So this will be your glomerulus here. This will be your Bowman's capsule, the capillaries. This will be your afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole. And as I mentioned a while ago, the distal tubule is actually located near yung ating afferent and efferent arteriole. Okay. Ito na yung lumen ng ating distal tubule. Remember, renal tubule is just like a tube, no? Kung saan magpapas yung ating urine, di ba? So ito yung, kung titignan mo yung cross-section, ito yung kanyang lumen. Okay, ng distal tubule natin. And we have a particular structure there, which is important. A apparatus, no? And it is composed of 3 sets of cells, yung ating JG apparatus. And they mentioned about the juxtaglomerular apparatus in the previous slide. The juxtaglomerular apparatus would be a group of 3 cells that is located here, no, in between the arterioles and the distal tubules. And these cells are actually your juxtaglomerular granular cells here. So from the name itself, no, may mga granules siya. These are actually the smooth muscle cells of the afferent arteriole. The granules contains what you call the renin. No? It's an enzyme which actually is involved in your renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system or RNAs. Okay, naalala nyo kanina, isa sa mga pinaproduce ng kidneys is the renin, and it will be produced by one of the cells in the Golgi apparatus, which would be your juxtaglomerular granular cells. Ito yung mga smooth muscles lining the afferent arteriole. Yung nauna kanina ay yung mga macula densa cells, which are the cells lining the distal convoluted tubule facing your glomerulus here. Ito yung mga very significantly big ang mga nucleus nila, no? The macula densa. And the last of the three cells, continue natin, as which we will discuss later. Okay? The last cells involved will be your extraglomerular mesangial cells, or the other name would be your Lacey cells, which are found between the arterioles and, of course, between the macula densa here. No? These are your Lacey cells. And they have several functions, from secreting matrix and basement membranes. They provide structural support. No? They have phagocytic activity, as well as they secrete some prostaglandins, no, involved also in regulation of the GF. Okay, so the Golgi apparatus, which composed of the three cells, is important. No? Meron silang mga secretions which will be important for regulating renal blood flow, or the amount of blood that will flow into the kidneys, and the glomerular filtration rate. Of course, yung filtration, yung mag-filter na blood, will depend on the blood flow, diba? To the kidneys. So these three cells here are important for regulating blood flow and the GFR, or glomerular filtration rate. Okay, do not forget, ang macula densa, they are the ones that are involved in GFR, no, regulation. The Golgi cells naman is in the release of renin, and then the Lacey cells, or the extraglomerular mesangial cells, are important in the production of prostaglandins and also support. Okay? So are your cells of your Golgi apparatus, which is also important. Three processes that are involved in urine formation. First would be glomerular filtration. When you say glomerular, so we have just finished already discussing the structure and function of the kidneys. So we go now to the processes that are involved in urine formation. Okay? Kasi syempre, the kidneys can only remove waste products through urine formation. Kasi doon pupunta yung mga waste products. Okay? So what are the processes that are involved? Isa-isahin natin. When you say glomerular filtration, this will be the process wherein the blood that goes to the nephron will be filtered by the glomerulus. Okay? And it will be the fluid that will be filtered is, of course, called the ultrafiltrate of the blood. Okay? The next part would be tubular reabsorption. Okay? So, from the name itself, this is the process wherein some of the contents of the filtrate, of the ultrafiltrate of the blood that was filtered, will be reabsorbed back into the circulation. Okay, because a lot of substances that are needed by the body has been filtered from the blood, which includes your electrolytes, glucose, and this will should be reabsorbed back, going into the systemic circulation. And the last process would be tubular secretion. So tubular secretion is just the some of the contents of the blood will be excreted towards the renal tubules and form part of your filtrate. Okay? So that when you say urine formation, the urine that is formed will be equivalent to the amount that will be filtered plus the amount that will be secreted into the renal tubules and less the components that will be reabsorbed back into the circulation. So that will constitute now the parts or the contents of your urine. Okay, so let's take a look at the specific parts of or the processes. So glomerular filtration would just be the process wherein the blood that is transported by the parent arteriole into the glomerulus is filtered through this filtration barrier here. So the filtration barrier is actually composed of the glomerular capillary cell. Okay. And next would be the glomerular basement membrane here. So if this will be the capillary, so the blood and you have filtrate here and now the what you call the Bowman's space. Okay, and this filtration barrier is actually semi-permeable, so meaning not all substances can pass through. Yung barrier na yun, syempre ito munang capillary, di ba? Unang-una, ito yung ating glomerular capillary endothelium. Ito yung ating endothelium muna. Yung unang barrier. Susunod ay yung glomerular basement membrane. Okay? So, glomerular basement membrane. Okay? And then you have your glomerular epithelium here. And then you have now the space. So, yung blood ay nandito sa capillary, di ba? So, pag na-filter siya, pupunta na siya sa filtrate. Pupunta na siya doon sa ating Bowman space, I should say. And ang mapupunta na lang doon pag na-filter na yung ating blood would be the filtrate. Okay? So, imagine niyo, ito yung ating capillary. Ito yung lumen niya. Nandito na yung ating blood. So, mafi-filter yung blood through this barrier here. And then, it is semi-permeable. So, hindi lahat ay makakalabas. So, there will be those that will not pupunta sa space. Ito na, dito sa space. And you call it now the filtrate. In the glomerulus,
Capillaries po, Dok.
o ano nga, yung mga barrier, may mga layer yan, di ba? Ano yung pinakauna? Don't you have your module with you?
Yung mga, yung ano po, glomero,
Not filtered will be the blood cells as well as medium to high molecular proteins because of course their radiuses would be much greater. But that will be retained after filtration and goes to the efferent arteriole will now contain blood cells and medium to high molecular weight protein. So meaning it would have a higher osmolarity. Okay. Bakit higher osmolarity? Kasi most of the fluid part of the blood goes into the filtrate.
Oo, nagperma lang ako. Andun, mamaya mo na daw patayin yan.
Occurs because the pressure that favors filtration, this is look at here, the arrow going to the capsular space, this will be those that favors filtration. So this will be your capillary hydrostatic pressure. So remember the plasma of the blood inside the capillary exerts hydrostatic pressure which goes out of the capillary. Okay. So this pressure is actually higher than the pressure that opposes your filtration, which are, of course, these two. So first would be your colloid osmotic pressure. You still remember that plasma proteins in the blood, here in the capillary, attracts water inside, no? Because of this colloid osmotic pressure. Another pressure that opposes the hydrostatic pressure would be the hydrostatic pressure of the filtrate. So once the filtrate is already here, the fluid pressure tends to go back to the capillary. So opposing now the filtration pressure of your hydrostatic. Remember, pag sinasabi natin ang hydrostatic pressure, we're referring to the pressure of the fluid part, diba? So, alam naman ninyo na ang hydrostatic pressure is always going out ang pressure niya. Palabas, no? The pressure that will force fluid to go out, no? So, yung fluid pressure ng plasma in the capillary here is very high, 60 mmHg, hydrostatic pressure ito. As opposed to, remember, yung mga proteins natin sa blood would exert colloid osmotic pressure. Can you still remember ano naman ang action ng colloid osmotic pressure? Does it cause water to go out or will it keep water inside? Attract water. It
Attract water.
attracts water and keeps water inside the capillaries. So ito, ina-attract niya paloob, no? Galing sa filtrate, no? There's a pressure, the colloid osmotic pressure here attracts water from the filtrate, na-filter na. And also, pressure is going out ang pressure niya. So from here, it goes back. Kasi hindi niya naman i-attract yung water, but it will cause water to go out, go back again to the capillary. However, if you add the opposing pressure, 18 plus referred to as an ultrafiltrate of the blood. So why it's called ultrafiltrate? Because it has the same osmolarity as that of plasma, which is 300 milliosmoles. And it has the same electrolyte content as that of plasma. But the difference is it has less protein because the medium to high molecular weights left behind, only the low molecular weights are filtered. Okay? Maliwanag ba yun, guys? So, a renal function parameter bakit ultrafiltrate ng blood? Clinical practice is maliwanag ba? Bakit tinawag na yung filtrate natin that was formed from filtration is also called ultrafiltrate of the blood? Dapat alam ninyo yun, ha? Ultrafiltrate. Kasi walang nagbago sa osmolarity. Okay? Okay, so we go now to one parameter that has been used clinically, no, to determine the function of the kidneys is the glomerular filtration rate. So, gaano kabilis yung pag-form ng filtrate ng mga nephrons natin. Okay? This is your glomerular filtration rate. So, GFR is actually evaluated because if there would be any discrepancies, if it's increased or decreases, then this will affect the filtration of blood into the kidneys, and therefore will affect the excretion of waste products from the body cavity. So GFR is actually expressed as milliliters of your glomerular filtrate that is formed per minute per kilogram body weight of the animal. So, for example, in a 10 kilogram dog that has a GFR of 5.3 ml per minute per kilogram, so around 53 ml of filtrate is formed per hour. Okay, so, nakuha niyo ba yun? So, ml of the filtrate form per minute per kilogram body weight. So sa example dito, kung ang GFR daw ng isang 10 kilogram dog is 5.3 ml per minute per kilogram, i-multiply mo lang kung ilang kilo yung aso. Kasi per kilo to So 10. Kaya naging 53 ml per hour ang nakuform na filtrate per hour, per minute. Sorry. Per minute, no? Kasi per minute ito. Sorry. In a 10 kilogram dog, no? Multiply mo lang siya times 10. No? So, that would be 53 ml per minute. So, bakit isa siyang renal function parameter? Kasi, of course, you all know that, again, kailangang ma-filter yung blood para ma-release together with urine yung ating metabolic waste. So kung umonte yung mapifilter, it will tell you umonte siya or dumami siya, meron tayong problem. No? Lalo na kung kukonte yung GFR mo, ibig sabihin hindi nare-release yung mga waste products ng maigi. Okay? Pag sobrang dami naman, pwedeng mataas ang blood pressure. Okay? So, there are several factors that could affect yung ating GFR. And pag meron tayong discrepancy sa GFR, it could mean that there is a problem in the function of your kidneys. So, GFR is just the milliliters of filtrate that is formed per minute per kilogram body weight of your animal. So, what are the factors that may affect your filtration rate? Now, of course, number one would be the net filtration pressure. And of course, pressure is directly related to blood flow. No? So, therefore, GFR is also related to, renal blood flow. Why? Because, of course, if the blood flow to the kidneys is low, this will decrease also the pressure. Remember, the blood pressure is brought about by the pressure of the blood to the walls of the artery. So, okay. Sige nga, sabi natin, unang mag-a-affect ay yung filtration pressure. Remember, dapat yung hydrostatic pressure mo ng blood ay mataas, 60. Paano kung mababa ang blood flow doon sa ating kidneys? Mas uunti ang blood, mas bababa ang hydrostatic pressure mo. So, kung wari, ang hydrostatic pressure mo na lang ay naging 55. Tapos ang iyong opposing pressure ay nasa 50. So anong mangyayari? Bababa yung net filtration pressure mo, mas mahina siya. So mas kukonti ang mafi-filter per minute. Nakukuha nyo ba guys kung paano na-apektuhan ng blood flow yung pressure? Kasi the hydrostatic pressure is brought about by the blood. Diba? The plasma component of the blood. So, kung kukunti ang pupunta ng blood flow, bababa din yung net filtration pressure. With a lower volume of blood going into the kidneys, then this will increase the capillary hydrostatic pressure. Next would be the permeability of the filtration barrier. So, if the filtration barrier has some abnormalities that will make filtration a lot harder, then this will also affect the amount of filtrate that is per minute. Okay, for example, if there will be any that will weaken the barrier, or it will destroy the barrier. Next is the surface available for filtration. So, for example, if an animal has a disease, so of course, some of the glomeruli are not functioning well, then the surface that will be used for filtration will be. And the last would be there are some neural and humoral factors that could also affect your GFR. So an example is that of your sympathetic nervous system, no? If it's during fight-or-flight conditions or stress, no? Body produces catecholamines, and catecholamines are vasopressors, so they produce vasoconstriction systemic, so it will affect the blood flow to your kidneys. Guys, nakuha niyo ba yon? Neural and humoral factors. Fight or flight condition. Sympathetic nervous system ang ma-activate, di ba? So, magkakaroon ng release ng norepinephrine, epinephrine. So, this will cause vasoconstriction. Ano ulit ang vasoconstriction? Miss Hoxon, anong mangyayari sa blood flow sa kidney pag may vasoconstriction? Hello, Miss Hoxon.
Dok, magdi-decrease ko, Dok.
Bakit? Kasi? Bakit magdi-decrease yung blood flow? Kasi? constriction.
Lilit po yung lumen do, kaya po magbibigay.
Lumen ng ay, ada. Naalala niyo pa? Whose segment of the circulation actually controls blood flow? Yung may smooth muscle sa wall?
Arterioles to.
Arterioles. So when you say vasoconstriction, the smooth muscle constricts. Diba? So yung apparent arteriole natin magko-constrict, so the blood flow will also decrease. So alam nyo naman, kung kukunti ang blood flowing through it, of course, the hydrostatic pressure will be also decreased. Tama? So remember, kailangan mo ng mataas na hydrostatic pressure than the osmotic pressure para magkaroon ng filtration. Okay? So, you think if meron tayong hypovolemia, monte yung circulating blood volume, so the blood flow will also decrease to the kidneys. Okay? Kasi mababawasan ng circulating blood flow. Okay? So yung surface available for filtration, that's the time when kung may mga particular segments lang or portion of the kidneys that will be affected. Remember, we have a million of nephrons in the kidneys. If some of them will not be working, then mababawasan yung mafe-filter per minute ng ating kidneys overall. Kasi mababawasan yung number of glomerulus that are performing the filtration. Okay? Any question dito sa factors? Parang masyado akong sobrano. Pero may question? Pwede ba tayong mag-break? Maybe break? Saglit lang? Bago tayo magpatuloy, no? Mag-share muna tayo. 10 minutes. Okay, guys? Okay lang ba? Sabihin niyo yung natapos natin. May questions ba kayo before we go to break? Questions? Wala? O sige, break tayo. See you again 2:50. No? 10 minutes. Hello. So we're back. Let's continue on. Any questions first? May question ba kayo? Okay, so wala. Let's go. Move. Okay. Okay, so explaining further on GFR. So some conditions may cause decrease in GFR as affected by the factors that we have discussed in the previous slide. So what are these conditions wherein GFR is decreased? Okay. First, number one is if the glomerular blood flow is decreased, because as I have said, once there's hypovolemia, blood flow decreases, and there will also be hypotension. So the blood pressure will also decrease. Okay, let's define first again. Ano ang hypovolemia again? Guys, hypovolemia. Miss Adroso, what is hypovolemia again?
Yung decrease circulating volume po, Doc. Yung
Dehydration po, Doc.
Decreased circulating volume sa blood. No? If you're talking about hypovolemia, you're talking about a deficiency in your intravascular fluid volume, yung nasa loob ng blood vessels na volume. So remember, the pressure depends on the blood, di ba? Ano nga ang definition natin ng pressure? Blood pressure is brought about by the distension of the walls, di ba, of the arteries by the blood. So kung kukunti ang blood mo, bababa din ang iyong blood pressure. So ang tawag doon sa decreased blood pressure would be hypotension. Maliwanag ba yun, guys? So if you have hypovolemia, it's naturally that you have hypotension or low blood pressure. Pag meron ka namang hypervolemia, increase in circulating blood volume, then you will also have hypertension. Tataas din ang blood pressure. Nakuha niyo ba yon? Nakuha niyo ba yon, guys? Mr. Portis, nakuha mo ba? Ang relationship ng volume to pressure? Magsao kayo. Okay. So, pag may hypovolemia ka at bumaba ang blood pressure mo, definitely, no? Hypovolemia will decrease blood flow. Kung konti lang yung mag-flow na blood, bababa din ang pressure. So, your GFR will decrease. Okay? Next is apparent arterial constriction. So, alam niyo naman na yung arteriole ang mag-control ng flow. Pag nag-constrict yun, bababa din ang blood flow, bababa din ang filtration rate mo. Decreased surface area, thickening of the filtration barrier. So, all of this will decrease GFR kasi kukonti. Kagaya ng thickening filtration barrier, pag meron kang glomerulosclerosis, no? Mas makapal yung kailangang ma-filter yung ating plasma. So, mas mahirap, no? Mas oonte yung ma-filter niya. Yung decreased surface area, na-explain ko na yan sa inyo. And then, yung release ng norepinephrine at epinephrine during fight or flight conditions. No? norepinephrine are vasopressors, meaning it will cause vasoconstriction. So again, it will decrease blood flow and therefore your GFR. Also that the hydrostatic pressure, the net filtration pressure. So what about those factors that may increase GFR? So in contrast, GFR will increase if blood flow to the glomerulus will also increase. So this is because if you have hypervolemia or the volume of blood in the circulation is higher than normal, then it will also reduce a pressure that will be higher. So you would have hypertension. So the net filtration pressure will be higher than normal. Another is if your apparent arteriole is dilated, of course the blood flow will also increase. It will be the nerves. And another would be efferent arterial constriction. So when efferent arterial constricts, so it will impede the draining of blood from the glomerulus. So as long as it does not decrease renal blood flow, this will increase your GFR. Okay, so GFR increase is much better than GFR decrease, But of course, when the increase in GFR will increase your glomerular filtrate and it may overwhelm your absorption capacity of renal glucose. Okay, so the next step in urine formation is tubular reabsorption. So as the filtrate is already in the Bowman's space, it will now, so like I said, sorry. Okay, so we follow through the filtrate. Nandun na siya sa Bowman space, di ba? So, pupunta na siya sa renal tubules. So, for example, this is your renal tubule here, kalahati, no? This is the lumen. So, pupunta dito yung filtrate. And remember, yung capillaries natin, peritubular capillaries, ay katabi lang ng ating renal tubule. Tama ba? Naaalala niyo ba? Ito yung capillary natin. Ito yung renal tubule natin. Ito na yung epithelium ng ating renal tubular cells. Naalala niyo ba guys? Na magkatabi lang ang mga perivascular capillaries? O. Pag sinabi mong renal tubule, para siyang tube. No? So, yung ating tube na to, meron siyang mga renal tubular cells. Ito yung epithelium na sinasabi. Lining it. Okay? So, ito yon. Okay? Nakukuha niyo ba guys? So, meron kang epithelium dyan. So, ito na yung ating lumen. Katabi niya lang yung mga capillaries. So, ito na. Pupunta na dito sa lumen ng ating renal tubule, yung filtrate. Okay? Okay, so the next step in urine formation is tubular reabsorption. So as the filtrate is already in the Bowman's space, it will now flow through the different segments of the renal tubule. And as it flows into the segments, it will undergo tubular reabsorption. So tubular reabsorption is just a process wherein the components of the plasma that was filtered by the glomerulus and goes into the renal tubules is reabsorbed back into the hemic circulation. So if this will be your renal tubule here, and this will be the lumen, so this will be your renal tubular cells. This is the interstitium, and this will be the peritubular capillaries. Can you still remember the peritubular capillaries? So reabsorption of some of the contents of the filtered components of the plasma is reabsorbed back into the systemic circulation. And of course, we also mentioned a while ago that one process also that is involved in urine formation is tubular secretion. So tubular secretion is just opposite. No? Some components of the plasma is excreted, no? Into the urine. No? So it goes the opposite way. It goes to the interstitium, then the renal tubular cells, then goes into the renal tubule to add to the filtrate. Maliwanag ba guys yung difference ng reabsorption at saka secretion sa inyo? Just follow the arrows. Reabsorptions mean some of the components of the filtrate will go back into the systemic circulation through the peritubular capillaries. Secretion naman, syempre, pag na-reabsorb, mababawasan yung filtrate. Diba? Secretion naman is from components of the plasma will now go into your tubular lumen. So from the capillary to the interstitium to the epithelium going to the lumen. So madadagdag naman yun sa filtrate. Okay? So we will talk about first reabsorption kasi yun yung pangalawang step ng urine formation. First, tubular reabsorption. Tubular reabsorption, we have defined, is possible because of the starting forces. No? So if you take a look at here, in the peritubular capillaries, there are two pressures that are present. The hydrostatic pressure that is, of course, brought about by the plasma, blood, that is in the capillaries, capillary hydrostatic pressure. And of course, this blood also contains proteins, no? So it has also colloid osmotic pressure. Now, okay, if we're talking about here, ito yung peritubular capillary natin. Ano ang meron dito? Lahat ng mga hindi na filter. Remember kanina? Blood cells, low and high molecular weight protein, nandito lahat yun. Pero meron ding natirang may natira ding fluid or plasma. Okay? So the plasma still have hydrostatic pressure at 17 mmHg, pero mataas yung colloid osmotic pressure. Why? Bakit mataas ang colloid osmotic pressure sa peritubular capillaries? Bakit mataas? Dahil nga, naiwan doon yung mga high molecular weight proteins, blood cells, kukunti na lang ang fluid. Okay? So this will be the pressures that will be present in your peritubular capillaries. So next naman is interstitial fluid. Ito yung fluid natin in between the capillary and the tubular epithelium. Siyempre, yung fluid na yun, meron din siyang hydrostatic pressure. Okay? Lahat ng may fluid, may hydrostatic pressure. So, and meron din mga proteins doon sa interstitium natin. That's why meron din siyang interstitial colloid osmotic pressure. Okay? So, titignan natin ngayon, ano yung mga pressure that will favor filtration. Sa tingin niyo, ano yung mga pressure that will favor filtration? That will favor reabsorption muna. Ano yung mga pressure that will help components of the filtrate here will go into the peritubular capillaries? Mr. Alikum,
Doc,
meron ba? Dito sa peritubular capillary, what pressure will cause reabsorption of fluid from your tubular lumen? Dito sa dalawang to.
Doc, yung hydrostatic pressure?
Yung?
Hydrostatic pressure po.
Kuya, tinatanong ko ay reabsorption ha? Pag ano?
Ah, yes po, Doc. Yung colloid po pala, Doc.
Kasi i-attract niya yung ating water here. Okay? So, ito, colloid osmotic pressure. Kasi itong hydrostatic pressure ay palabas. Actually, it favors secretion or what you call filtration. Diba? Tama?
Yes po.
What about dito? Anong pressure will favor reabsorption?
Hydrostatic daw.
Okay, the hydrostatic pressure kasi pag ganyan, no? Kasi pag sinabi mong osmotic pressure naman, ipupull niya naman yung fluid from the capillaries. That's why, no? Yung reabsorption pressure natin ay 30 plus 6 mmHg, that's 36. Which will now oppose yung ating filtration pressure, yung palabas, yung secretion, no? Which would be, of course, brought about by this hydrostatic pressure coming from your peritubular capillaries and your colloid osmotic pressure in your interstitial fluid. So kung titignan ninyo, may net reabsorption pressure tayo. So mas pinifavor yung reabsorption if we take a look at the pressures here. Okay? Maliwanag ba tayo sa ating reabsorption? No? That is how reabsorption occurs, no? Because of the net reabsorption pressure, no? Kung titignan natin yung mga differences in hydrostatic pressure and colloid osmotic pressure in the peritubular capillary and in the interstitial fluid. So, ibig sabihin, pag pumunta yung filtrate dito sa lumen, most of the components of the filtrate will be reabsorbed. Okay? Most will be reabsorbed. Although there are times wherein may meron din component in the blood which will be secreted out papunta sa lumen. Okay? But this will now depend dun sa mga gradient ng mga ions naman natin. No? Naalala nyo? So, magkakaroon tayo secretion which will be now affected ng mga gradient natin ng mga ion concentrations. Okay? So, yun lang tatandaan nyo dito. Reabsorption going into the capillary. Secretion is from the capillary going into the tubular lumen.
So let us review the parts of the renal tubules where this glomerular filtrate will pass through and some reabsorption will occur. So if you take a look at here, these are the different renal tubules, the PCT, the leukophili, distal tubule, and collecting tubule. If you take note, as your filtrate is absorbed primarily in the proximal tubule. Almost 80% are being reabsorbed there by active and passive absorption. And then only 6% is reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, where water and salt are being reabsorbed. And in the distal tubule, you have 9% of the filtrate. And in the collecting duct, only 4% now are reabsorbed in your collecting tubules or duct. And again, salt and water are being reabsorbed in this portion of your renal tubule, no? And once it's already in the renal pelvis, no, only 1% now of the total filtrate that is in the woman's space, no, is retained, and it's the volume that will be urinated that will go out of it. So the kidney has the capacity, particularly the renal tubule, to reabsorb the filtered important components of that, like the electrolytes, glucose, and water, sodium. Okay, so let's take a look at one by one absorption in the different tubules. So as I have said a while ago, majority of the filtrate, about 65 to 80% of the glomerular filtrate is being reabsorbed back into the peritubular capillary. So as you can see here, this is your proximal tubule here. This will be the cells, renal tubular cells, and this will be the lumen. The arrow goes from the lumen going into the capillaries, and these are the different substances that are being reabsorbed back: water, glucose, amino acids, sodium chloride, bicarbonate, and potassium. So you have your electrolytes there, water, and these substances, especially the electrolytes, glucose, amino acids, requires specific transport mechanisms in order to be reabsorbed into the renal tubules and into your peritubular capillaries. So you have all of that in your module. So it's your turn, or it's your responsibility to learn about it. I just place here as an example the absorption of glucose. If you take a look at here, this will be the lumen, this will be your renal tubular cells, and this interstitial peritubular capillaries. There's glucose and amino acids here. It will be transported via sodium cotransport. Co-transport with sodium. No? So once inside the renal tubular cells, glucose now will be reabsorbed into your peritubular capillaries via facilitated diffusion. And you know that facilitated diffusion is guys, okay. Nandito na naman tayo sa mga transport mechanisms, ha? Passive and active transport tayo, di ba? Alam niyo na yung passive transport. Ano ulit ang difference ng passive at active transport? Ano ulit ang difference ng passive at active transport?
Yung presence ng energy, Doc. Sa passive, wala po. And then, yung sa active, meron po.
Okay. The use of source of energy in the transport of substances. So sa passive, you don't need energy to transport substances. You rely on the concentration gradient or difference. Okay? While sa active transport, you need energy source. So it's either ATP, that would be on primary active transport, or sodium gradient ang magiging energy source mo, and that would be your secondary active transport. So tinignan ninyo, napakadaming electrolytes ang mare-reabsorb. All of them will be reabsorbed through transport mechanisms. And sabi ko nga, kayo ang magbasa. Titingnan ninyo kung ano yung mga mechanisms that are involved. Ang nilagay ko lang na example dito ay glucose. Glucose is reabsorbed from the lumen going into the
renal tubular cell through sodium co-transport. So sodium kasama ang glucose. Pagpasok ng glucose sa loob, pupunta naman siya sa capillaries via facilitated diffusion. Okay? So alam niyo ang facilitated diffusion will need a carrier, diba? Transport protein. So ibig sabihin nasa-saturate siya. Naalala niyo pa ang saturation kinetics niyo? Ibig sabihin, pag dumami ang itatransport na glucose, mapupuno yung ating carrier sa facilitated diffusion. So, pwedeng hindi niya matransport lahat ng glucose pag sobrang madami ang glucose sa filtrate. Okay? So, yun yung nangyayari kapag may diabetes yung animal. Normally, dapat lahat ng glucose na mapifilter ay marere-absorb. Pero sa sobrang taas ng glucose sa blood ng isang animal na may diabetes, hindi lahat nare-reabsorb kasi nasa-saturate yung transport natin, facilitated diffusion. Okay? So, isang clinical application yon, no? Nakikita ninyo na abnormal na may makikita kang glucose sa urine kasi dapat nare-reabsorb lahat. Yun lang sa mga may diabetes, no? Nasa-saturate yung transport mechanism natin which is facilitated diffusion. Hindi nata-transport lahat ng glucose kaya meron kang glucose sa urine. Okay? So yung iba, kailangan yung basahin, guys. Kailangan yung basahin yung iba. Matatandaan nyo, almost 65 to 80% ng filtrate ay marere-absorb sa proximal tubule.
Can be saturated, no? Can be overwhelmed if glucose transported is in excess. Glucose is in sorry for that. So, as an example, it was stated in your module that if there would be...
Okay. So, titignan nyo rin yung arrow dito. This would just mean that it's not only reabsorption that occurs in the primary and the proximal tubule, meron din tayong secretion. Diba? From the capillaries going into the renal tubule. So, ano yung mga nagse-secrete sa proximal tubule? Hydrogen ion, organic acids, bases, and meron tayong mga endogenous substances and exogenous substances that can be secreted, okay, into the proximal tubule. Ano nga yung mga yon? Kindly check your module. Ano yung mga masesecrete sa proximal tubule? Miss Dela Cruz? Ano yung mga masesecrete sa proximal tubule?
Endogenous drugs po, Doc. Tapos exogenous drugs.
Ano yung mga examples? There's a list nandyan sa inyo. Sa module nyo, ano yung mga examples ng exogenous drugs, yung mga drugs na secrete dyan. Kaya nga tayo nagkakaroon ng, di ba? Urine drug testing kasi merong mga drugs that will be secreted in the urine at makikita mo doon sa urine. Ano yung mga example?
Sa endogenous po, Doc, yung bile salts, creatinine, urates, prostaglandin, and euphorates. Tapos exogenous drugs po, Doc, is penicillin G, pyramid sulfa, furosemide, morphine, and paraquat herbicide, Doc.
Okay, and also some of the dangerous drugs, no? pwede silang ma-secrete. Wait lang ha. May tawag na. Okay, so meron din mga endogenous, di ba? Yung urea is a waste product of metabolism. No? So it's being secreted into the filtrate, no? To be incorporated in the urine. Maliwanag ba tayo? So tingnan niyo ano yung characteristics ng proximal tubule, bakit madaming nare-reabsorb doon, no? Tingnan niyo yung mga brush border niya, ganyan. Okay? And yung epithelium niya. Question. So, unang segment pa lang yan, ha? So, saan napapunta o susunod yung ating filtrate? So, nabawasan na siya ng almost 80%, 20% na lang. Saan na siya pupuntang segment?
Look of Henry, Doc. Look of
Okay,
Henry, Doc.
hinli na siya. So, ano yung una? Descending thin limb. Look of hinli. Then, descending, ascending, and then ascending thin, and then ascending thin. Tingnan natin.
The next renal tubule segment where the glomerular filtrate will flow coming from the proximal tubule will be the loop of Henle. Okay? So as we have said, there's 3 loops of the loop of Henle. No? So this part of the renal tubule is actually very important in their role in maintaining the hypertonic medullary interstitium. So if this would be the cortex part, so the loop of Henle here will be in the medulla. No? And they play a role in maintaining hypertonicity in this interstitium, so in the medulla, which is important in concentrating the urine, so particularly the descending inlet of the loop of Henle. So as the filtrate passes through this proximal tubule, you see here that the osmolarity of the glomerular filtrate is maintained at 300 milliosmoles, which is comparable to plasma. But as the filtrate passes through the descending thin loop of Henle, this limb of the loop of Henle is permeable to water. So meaning, much of the water in the filtrate is reabsorbed into the peritubular capillaries. Okay? Peritubular capillaries.
Okay. So, ano ang nare-reabsorb sa descending thin limb?
Water, Doc.
Water. Okay? So, nakikita ninyo that once water from the filtrate is reabsorbed, what happens to the osmolarity of the filtrate?
Tataas po.
It increases. Sige. Ituloy natin.
Capillaries, so that the osmolarity of the filtrate in this segment becomes high. So this segment is also called your concentrating segment because the filtrate becomes concentrated in this segment.
Okay? Descending
So
thin.
as it turns
Concentrating segment.
to your ascending thin limb and then ascending thick limb, no? Here, ascending thin and ascending thick limb here, these segments are not permeable to water anymore, but it is highly permeable to sodium chloride. So that would mean that sodium is being reabsorbed here. No? So making this interstitium now here reabsorb sodium chloride. Remember, solutes will make the osmolarity to be higher. So as it is reabsorbed, no, the filtrate now becomes diluted. Because much of the solute is reabsorbed in these segments of your loop of Hindi. No? Particularly sa ating ascending take lane o loop of.
Okay. More particularly, more reabsorption occurs in the ascending thick limb, no, ng sodium. So, ibig sabihin, mababawasan ng solute. That's why the osmolarity decreases. Diba? From 1,200. Okay, diba? Because the sodium and chloride was reabsorbed, bringing the osmolarity in the interstitium to be high. So, since mataas ang osmolarity dito, this will attract more water from the descending thin limb. Nakukuha nyo ba? Guys? So, yung ating ascending limb of loop of Henle is also called your diluting segment. No, nakita nyo naman na yung osmolarity kasi ay bumaba, while yung descending thin limb ay concentrating segment. Okay? So nakita ninyo how important the loop of Henle is in maintaining the medullary interstitium to be hypertonic kasi mataas yung osmolarity sa interstitium because of this, no? Reabsorption of sodium and chloride in this limb. There are also other electrolytes that are absorbed in your ascending thick limb. Tignan natin
Henle. And because of that, so, yung ating thick limb is actually considered naman or called diluting segment because the filtrate in this area becomes or has a lower osmolarity due to the reabsorption of sodium and chloride. So, it was not reflected in here, but some electrolytes other electrolytes are also reabsorbed in these segments, no? Particularly in the ascending thick limb, wherein we have what you call sodium potassium chloride transporter. So you have your sodium, potassium, and chloride transporter. So that potassium will also be observed in this segment, as well as
calcium and magnesium.
as
Guys,
well as calcium and magnesium.
okay. I'd like you to memorize that, na meron tayong symporter sa ascending thick limb loop of Henle, which transport sodium, potassium, and chloride. Sabay-sabay yun. No? Symporter. Okay? So, hindi lang sodium at chloride ang nare-reabsorb in that segment, but also potassium, and also calcium and magnesium. Importante kasi itong symporter na ito when you go to your pharmacology, it's one of the target of your diuretic drugs. So, huwag niyong kakalimutan na meron tayong transport protein dito sa ascending thick limb, which transport 3, sodium, potassium, and chloride.
Okay? Calcium and magnesium is also reabsorbed in this segment. So it was emphasized here that these reabsorbed solutes, sodium, chloride, and potassium, it's because this particular transporter transports these three electrolytes in a target of a particular diuretic called loop diuretics, which was again explained in your module. Okay? So those are the three limbs of the loop of Henle and their importance in maintaining the hypertonic medullary interstitium. No? Remember, as the medulla become more hypertonic, it will attract more water coming from the descending thin vein of Henle, thereby concentrating the more filtrate in your descending vein. So these two limbs actually is very important in the maintenance of hypertonic medullary health. Okay, so the next segment now were the filtrate.
Guys, bakit importante na hypertonic yung medullary interstitium natin? Kasi yun yung it will pave the way in absorbing more water and also salvaging more electrolytes. Remember, sabi ko sa inyo, dapat ma-reabsorb yung mga content ng filtrate natin kasi kailangan yun ng katawan. Kung hindi, mawa-waste lang siya. So kung hindi concentrated tong area na ito, it will not attract water. Diba? So hindi ma-reabsorb yung water sa filtrate. Okay? So, kailangan yung ating interstitium ay hypertonic. Okay? So, we go now to the next step, no? Saan na pupunta yung ating filtrate? Papunta na siya sa distal convoluted tubule. And pagdating niya dito, ilang percent na lang siya? Kasi sabi natin kanina, I think 80% in the PCT, 6% in the distal convoluted tubule. So, nandun ka na lang sa 14%. No? So, papunta na siya sa distal convoluted and then papunta na siya sa collecting ducts natin. Assume natin.
Filtrate flow coming from your loop of Henle as a lengthy vein would be now your distal convoluted tubule. So I also use this illustration because the substances that are reabsorbed here are also seen in this illustration. So in the distal tubule, some reabsorption of sodium, chloride, and water also occurs in here. Okay? So meaning it's permeable to both water and sodium chloride. And as you could see, from this ascending technique, no? So since water and some electrolytes are being reabsorbed in the distal tubule, no? The filtrate now is ultimately, as it leaves the distal tubule, becomes now again at 300 milliosmoles. No?
Pero madidilute din siya dito.
Diluted in here. No? It becomes diluted in here. But then again, since water is being reabsorbed, so
It will also be diluted here, but it will ultimately become all
becomes
isosmotic.
300 milliosmoles as it leaves the distal tubule. So aside from your sodium chloride and water, it must be also reflected in here that there's also calcium reabsorption in this segment. And this is actually the segment where calcium reabsorption, which is regulated by your hormone, parathyroid hormone, occurs in your
calcium reabsorption in this segment, in the distal tubule, is regulated by the parathyroid hormone. It's actually a hormone secreted by your parathyroid gland, which increases the reabsorption of calcium in this segment, in the distal tubule. Okay? So, pwede niyang padamihin yung ma-reabsorb basta merong PTH. Okay? While yung calcium reabsorption dito sa loop of Henle here is not dependent on PTH. Okay?
Which is also in your module, in the latter part about the hormones that are involved in the reabsorption of electrolytes as well as water in the nephron. Okay, so this is another illustration here of the different substances that are being reabsorbed, sodium and chloride, and also water, and potassium, and bicarbonate. No? So I must emphasize also that the reabsorption of water in the segment, in the distal convoluted tubule as well as in the collecting duct, no, is influenced by the hormone antidiuretic or vasopressin, which is secreted by the hypothalamic nuclei, no? Yung ating paraventricular
Nuclei. O, dalawa na yung hormone na nabanggit natin, ha?
nuclei of your hypothalamus.
PTH at saka ADH. PTH.
With its presence,
parathyroid.
will reabsorb water in the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct to conserve water if the animal needs it. So obviously, ADH is being secreted by the hypothalamus if there is a need to conserve water like in dehydration, or if the animal is not drinking much water. Okay? So, that of bicarbonate and the secretion of acid will be discussed more when we discuss renal acid-base homeostasis. Okay? Okay, the next segment now, where the filtrate coming from the distal convoluted will go to, will be on the collecting duct, particularly yung mga tatlong segments, cortical, outer medullary, saka inner medullary, collecting duct. Here now, okay? So, we know from our previous slide that only 4% now of the filtrate will be reabsorbed in this segment, no? And again, as you can see here, water is also reabsorbed in this area but is under the influence of ADH. So that means that in its presence, water will be reabsorbed, and so that the urine that will be voided will be more concentrated. But in its absence, water will not be reabsorbed, so the urine that will be voided will be more diluted.
Okay. So, tingnan natin, ha? So, yung ADH is a hormone that is released by the hypothalamus if the body needs to conserve water. So, pag meron siya, it will cause reabsorption of water in your collecting duct and your distal convoluted tubule. So, mangyayari, mas oonti lang yung urine mo. Mas concentrated siya. Okay? Kasi ikikip yung water ng body. Pero kung hindi kailangan ng katawan ng water, no, well hydrated ka, hindi magpo-produce ang ating hypothalamus ng ADH. So pag walang ADH, hindi mare-reabsorb yung water, mas madaming water ang pupunta sa urine. Kaya diluted yung urine mo. Paano mo malalamang diluted? Sa kulay pa lang at volume. Walang kulay at sobrang dami, that's diluted urine. Ibig sabihin, hindi ka dehydrated, no? Yung excess na tubig mo ay iniihi mo. Pero kung ang urine mo ay parating yellow, ibig sabihin nun ay kulang ka sa tubig. Yung body mo ay kinikip niya yung water. Nagpo-produce siya ng ADH ang iyong hypothalamus. Okay? So yan yung unang hormone dyan, no? There's another hormone that is involved in the reabsorption of electrolytes in the collecting duct. So tingnan natin.
Related, or it has a larger volume. Okay? So the other substances that are reabsorbed in here would be urea and bicarbonate. No? And something that is secreted is also your hydrogen ion. So these two or three will be discussed more when we go to renal acid base homeostasis. But I have to emphasize that the sodium reabsorption here in your collecting duct is under the influence of the hormone aldosterone. Aldosterone is a hormone secreted by your adrenal gland in response to conditions wherein sodium level is low in the body. So just like hyponatremia. So hyponatremia is actually low levels of sodium in the blood. Okay? What else? Hypovolemia. Okay? Or hypotension. So hypovolemia and hypotension is related because if the circulating volume of blood is low, then of course the pressure will be low, kaya hypotension. Okay? So aldosterone has actually three effects, not only sodium reabsorption, but there's also, first effect is sodium reabsorption. I want you to memorize this kasi you will be needing this throughout, even in your clinical internship or clinical subjects. Sodium reabsorption first, and then potassium secretion. Okay, so wala dito. So ilagay ko na lang yung arrow, no? Potassium secretion. So, may arrow should be here. Potassium secretion. So, go there. And the third would be hydrogen ion secretion also.
Okay. So again, no? Aldosterone will only be secreted by the adrenal gland if there is hyponatremia, decreased sodium levels in the blood, hypovolemia, or hypotension. So pag meron ka nitong mga condition na to, aldosterone will be produced by the adrenal gland. And these are the three effects. Ang primary is sodium chloride reabsorption, number 1. Number 2 is potassium ion secretion. So isa-secrete yung potassium from the blood going into the lumen of the renal tubule. And also hydrogen ion secretion. Huwag niyong kakalimutan yung tatlong effect na yan or action ng aldosterone. No? So kakailanganin ninyo yan nito. Okay? And again, yung ating ADH, no? Which will be involved naman in water reabsorption.
So this. Okay? So this is the first function, sodium reabsorption. Second would be potassium secretion. And third would be hydrogen ion secretion. So again,
Guys,
this on
aldosterone can also be secreted if you have hyperkalemia. Ano ibig sabihin ng hyperkalemia? High potassium level in the blood. Bakit sa tingin ninyo marerelease ang aldosterone ng adrenal gland pag may hyperkalemia? Miss Quaresma. O, tingnan ninyo to. Pag may hyponatremia, mababa ang sodium level sa blood, may aldosterone ka. Why? Kasi ire-reabsorb niya yung sodium para tumaas yung sodium sa blood. What about pag may hyperkalemia ka? Meron bang aldosterone secretion o wala?
Meron, Dok.
Meron, no? Kasi nga mataas ang potassium mo sa blood, so yung aldosterone, i-help niya i-decrease yun by secreting it towards the urine para yung excess potassium mo ay lalabas sa urine. Okay? Nakukuha niyo ba yun, guys? So, kailangan ninyong, alam niyo yung mga terms, hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia. No? So, pag hypokalemia, mababa ang blood levels mo ng potassium, your adrenal gland will not secrete aldosterone. Okay? Kasi hindi kailangan na i-excrete o secrete ang ating potassium sa blood.
Or the effects of aldosterone and the collecting that in the reabsorption of various of sodium, and then secretion of potassium and hydrogen. Okay, so that would be now the process of urine formation. So urine now that is formed is actually only 1% of the original filtrate that was filtered from the glomerulus. So it's concentrated. Now, the final form of the urine will depend on the presence or absence of ADH. In the presence of ADH, urine will be more concentrated. Okay, concentrate. Now, with the absence of ADH, then your urine will be diluted. Okay. So, I do hope you read your modules, especially on the parts of the so I'm mistaken, I still have a few slides. No? Just to summarize, the substances that are being reabsorbed in the different segments of the renal tubules. So again, in the proximal convoluted tubule, where most are being reabsorbed, and most electrolytes, glucose, and acids. No? And in the ascending kidney, water is reabsorbed. Ascending peak, ascending and ascending peak sodium chloride, as well as potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Now, in the distal convoluted tubule, you have sodium, potassium, calcium, urea, and of course water. Don't forget that. The collecting duct, water also, sodium, hindi naman nakalagay dito, sodium, remain levels of aldosterone, and then urea and magnesium. So, just be familiar. Maybe you can memorize what are the different substances that are being reabsorbed in the different tubules. In here will be the summary of the substances that are secreted in the different parts of the tubule. Particularly, we mention in the proximal tubule, hydrogen ion, acids, bases, and some exogenous and endogenous substances, as well as ammonium here. No? In the descending thin limb, there's also secretion of ammonium and urea, as well as in the ascending thick limb, ammonium. In the distal convoluted tubule, there might be potassium and hydrogen ion secretion, again under the influence also of aldosterone, and then secretion of ammonium. And in here, secretion of potassium and hydrogen ion, again under the influence of aldosterone, and of course, ammonium. Okay? So you have several areas here where ammonium will be secreted in the segments of the trunk. Okay, so it's my last slide. So it's actually a review of the different parts and their function. So I do hope you will review all of this in your module, which is more. Okay. So guys, I'd like you to pay particular attention dun sa ating mga tawag doon, yung ating hormones, no, that are involved doon sa mga reabsorption and secretion in the different segments of the tract. So nandun yun sa module ninyo, just to show you. Okay, we have several. Aldosterone, nabanggit na natin yan. Antidiuretic hormone or the ADH. Atrial natriuretic peptide. Vitamin D3. Angiotensin 2. Endothelin. Parathyroid hormone, na-discuss natin to. And then, calcitonin. Okay? So, I'd like you to read yung ating mga hormones, no? Number 1, yung aldosterone. Alam na ninyo na it's released by your adrenal gland. And it actually is released if there is hypotension, hyperkalemia, hyponatremia via the renin-angiotensin system. Okay? And alam na ninyo yung tatlong action niya, sodium reabsorption sa collecting duct, potassium and hydrogen ion secretion. Okay? Hindi pa natin na-discuss yung RAAS, but just memorize saan galing adrenal cortex and ano yung mag-stimulate ng release and ano yung mga action. Another, angiotensin 2, again, this is released during activation of your renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, no? So, that would be naka-open ang mic. Okay, it will stimulate the release of aldosterone. So, pag may angiotensin 2 ka, meron kang aldosterone. And meron ka na ng tatlong action ng aldosterone. Okay? Another is, it will elevate the blood pressure through vasoconstriction. Okay? So, aside from release of aldosterone, it will also cause increase in blood pressure via vasoconstriction. Angiotensin 2. Ito yung ating RAAS, no, which we will be discussing, no, in autoregulation next week. Wait lang. ADH. Again, alam niyo na yung ADH. Nakikita niyo na itong PDF ko, ha? Kikita niyo?
So yung anti-diuretic hormone, it's a hormone that is produced by the hypothalamus, but it is released from your posterior pituitary gland. Again, pag dehydrated yung animal, may hypovolemia, or dehydrated yung animal, this hormone will be released para ma-reabsorb ang water, no, sa ating collecting duct so that your urine will be concentrated. So pag hindi mo kailangan ng water sa katawan, walang ADH. Endothelin naman is produced from the endothelial cells of your collecting duct and your thick ascending loop of Henle. So it acts on receptors in the segments, resulting in sodium and chloride and water secretion. No? Again, no, it will cause secretion of sodium, chloride, and water. Ang ating endothelin. Saan? Sa collecting duct at sa thick ascending loop of Henle. Natriuretic peptide naman, this is a hormone naman that is produced by the heart. So, kailan naman ito pinoproduce ng heart? Pag meron kang hypervolemia. Pag may hypervolemia ka kasi, mataas ang volume ng circulating blood, mataas ang pressure, di ba? Meron kang hypertension. So, anong gagawin ng hormone na ito? It will enhance sodium excretion. So, paano? By inhibiting aldosterone release. Okay? So, since wala kang sodium, hindi mare-reabsorb yung sodium, wala ding mare-reabsorb na water. Kasi di ba, usually, water will follow sodium. Kung sana may hypovolemia ka, may aldosterone, di ba? So pag may aldosterone, sodium ay mare-reabsorb. Kung saan pupunta ang sodium, sasama ang water. So it will treat now the hypovolemia. Kasi aside from sodium reabsorption, sasama din ang water. In opposite naman, pag sobrang dami mo ng fluid sa katawan, no? Hypervolemia. Pag may hypervolemia ka naman, ayaw mo na ng excess water, di ba? Tama ba? Sige, tingnan natin. Hypovolemia. Hypervolemia. This is high blood volume. This is wrongness. Baliktad. This is low circulating blood volume. Ito naman ay high circulating blood volume. So what is the pressure pag may hypovolemia? Mababa, mataas?
Mababa po.
So hypotension. Dito naman ay mataas, hypertension. Okay. So, pag may hypovolemia ka ba, will the body produce ADH or hindi? Hypovolemia. Hindi. Ito na lang tanong ko. Pag may hypovolemia ba, kailangan mo ng water? Kailangan bang ma-conserve ang water? O hindi?
Hindi po, Doc.
Hypovolemia ay mababa ang iyong circulating blood volume. So, kailangan mong i-conserve yung water para tumaas yung volume ng blood mo. Di ba? You need water. Di ba? conserve. Dito, pag hypervolemia naman, sobrang dami ka na ng water or sobra yung volume ng blood mo, you don't need to conserve water. You can excrete or urinate water. Di ba? Tama ba? Uy, guys. So since kailangan mo i-conserve yung water pag may hypovolemia, kailangan mo ba ng ADH o hindi?
Kailangan, Dok.
Kailangan mo kasi ang ADH ay it will reabsorption of water. Pag may hypervolemia ka naman, hindi mo kailangan ng ADH. So wala kang ADH. Okay? Oh, next question. Water to, no? Pag may hypovolemia ka ba, kailangan mo ba ng sodium? O
Yes,
hindi?
Dok.
Kailangan mo ng sodium kasi pag na-reabsorb yung sodium, water will follow. Diba? Tama? Eh dito sa so you don't need sodium here. What about, kailangan mo. Yes, kailangan mo ng sodium. Sorry. Dito sa hypervolemia, kailangan mo pa ba ng sodium?
Hindi na, Dok.
Hindi na po.
Hindi na po.
Kukuha nyo ha. So bakit kailangan natin ng sodium dito sa hypovolemia? Kasi,
It attracts water.
pag na-reabsorb ang sodium, water follows. Okay? So, will there be aldosterone secretion with hypovolemia or wala?
Meron, Dok.
Okay, may aldosterone dito kasi kailangan mo ng sodium. What about hypervolemia? Meron bang aldosterone?
Wala, Dok.
Wala po.
Anong hormone ang kailangan mo pag may hypervolemia ka? Ay, gosh. Ito na yon. Atrial natriuretic peptide. Bakit? Kasi i-inhibit niya yung aldosterone and ADH para hindi ma-reabsorb ang sodium. Bakit? Kasi pag na-reabsorb yung sodium, mas